Today on Upfront, the Government Accountability Board under fire. A Republican lawmaker calls the agency rogue. Next, Executive Director Kevin Kennedy defends the GAB and his job. Then, it's tax time. The governor says your property taxes are going down. Republican Representative Dale Cuenga on the additional tax cuts they want to make. Plus, the Milwaukee streetcar on hold. How opponents still hope to derail the project for good.
Covering the issues important to Wisconsin. This is Up Front with Mike Goucher.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Up Front. The Government Accountability Board was created 7 years ago to oversee elections and ethics in Wisconsin. But now its future appears uncertain. Republican leaders in the state legislature are talking about big changes to the GAB. Speaker Robin Vos and Senate Majority Leader Scott Fitzgerald have expressed unhappiness with the board's function. Vos went so far as to call GAB Executive Director Kevin Kennedy an embarrassment, who, in Vos's words, needs to go. An audit release last week detailed some problems with the GAB's operation and prompted more calls to replace it. But the audit also said the GAB adequately fulfilled most of its duties. Kennedy defended the board's nonpartisan structure at a meeting last Tuesday, and Kevin Kennedy joins us now on Up Front. It's good to have you back on the program.
Thank you.
Glad
to be here.
I wanted to get your reaction to what one of the members of the legislature's audit committee said, Senator Alberta Darling, and she said, and I'm quoting now, "The audit proves what Republicans have been saying for years. The GAB isn't doing its job. The audit shows staff at this rogue agency often ignore state law, keep board members in the dark, and operates completely against its founding principles. That is unacceptable." What's your reaction to that statement?
Well, she may find it unacceptable, but it's also a very inaccurate characterization of what's been going on for the past 4 years. I mean, if anything, the Government Accountability Board is one of Wisconsin's success stories. What we have managed in the last 4 years with all the political turmoil, normally there's 12 election events during that audit period. We had over 40. Normally we have less than 20 disclosure filings, campaign finance, lobbying, ethics disclosure. During that period, because of the additional recall elections, statewide recount, we ended up with well over 30 disclosure filings. And those are the mileposts of how well we performed. There were no outcries about how well the elections were run by state and local election officials. There were no concerns that information wasn't getting to the public about where money was coming from. The board was really doing a very good job. There were a number of lawsuits challenging the decisions we made during the recall. Every single one of those was upheld by the court.
And yet you would concede, as the audit found, there were some problems. I mean, the investigation of whether or not felons voted in certain elections, that was not done. State law calls for that. Your response as to why that wasn't done?
Well, let me be clear. Yes, the audit is a good tool, and it pointed out some things where we need to improve, and it confirmed things we knew. But let's talk about the felon audit, because throughout that period, audits were being done, checks were being done on felons. Every month, the Government Accountability Board gets a report from the Department of Corrections. And every day when a local election official enters a voter registration into that system, it's checked against that data. In addition, in the 20 days before the election, when people can register in the clerk's office or at the polls on election day, they have a paper report in front of them that gives them a list of the current felons. What wasn't getting done was that after each election, the Department of Corrections gives us a separate file of those people who are under supervision on election day. And what we learned as we went through that was, one, that file is not very accurate. Many of the people who are listed as being incarcerated or out on paper, in fact, have been taken off of supervision. And so what we did was take that one part of the process, the rest of it was still in place, so felons were still getting checked, and fix that, improve the workflow for our staff. We end up saving the taxpayers much more money, and we were able to go back and do those checks all within the statute of limitations. So we identified a number of felons that the municipal clerks missed, which is what the purpose of that post-election audit is for, is to check up on the municipal clerk's work, and referred them, and no one who would be referred to the district attorney would be lost because of the passing of the statute of limitations.
So you believe the Republicans' concerns about what this audit showed are grossly overstated? Would that be a fair statement on my part?
Right. I'd say they're certainly overblown. There's no question that we're not perfect. Every day when I go to work, I'm thinking, how can I do a better job? A good manager welcomes an audit. They don't like to be told where you fall short, and certainly that's done, and it's done in a very public manner. But you take that and you work on that to improve. We knew going into the audit that our administrative rules have been put on the back burner. It was a conscious choice that we had to make given all of the responsibilities we had during that period. It was a very unusual time with a lot of activity. I had to make choices about how to assign my legal resources. We were involved in 16 plus lawsuits where our staff was testifying, defending the voter ID law, defending the redistricting law, and our attorneys needed to be working with our staff in depositions, working with our private attorneys in the Attorney General's office to defend those laws. That's an allocation of resources. Now, I'm expecting as we move forward in 2015, we won't have quite the level of litigation, and I have currently a vacancy in the attorney position. We'll expect to get that filled in early January, and we will focus very heavily on bringing those rules up to date.
Let me ask you a very blunt question. If the GAB, as it's currently operating, if you were to resign and that were allowed to survive, would that be something you would think about doing if you thought the current structure of the GAB could survive? Would you consider stepping down?
Well, I'm not a quitter. Let's start with that.
Because I sense this has become almost personal between some lawmakers and you. They don't like you, and you're there, and therefore they're going to change the GAB.
Well, and I'm not going to take it personally. I will say that my agency would operate just fine without me because I've got really good quality staff. Now, many of those staff are on a very short term, and if the legislature doesn't act to extend that staff, then there will be issues. I have a number of people whose terms end as of June 30th of 2015. And part of our budget request this year, and we've had it in the past, is the legislature needs to recognize that. Otherwise, we go from 30 people administering elections in the state of Wisconsin to 4, and that doesn't include me.
So I don't hear you saying you would consider stepping down. You said you're not a quitter.
That's right. I serve at the pleasure of a citizen board, and I report to that citizen board. I've done that every day through the 7 years of the existence of this board, and prior to that when I worked for the State Elections Board. So I audition for my job every day. The current board is not shy about telling me where I can improve, and if that's a discussion that the board wants to have, we will have that discussion. But I'm not going to make any kind of public commitment that I'm going to walk away from something that I take all the responsibility for, and I'm willing to share all the success with the people who've helped make our elections run very smoothly in a very tumultuous time.
Finally, I have to ask you about your concerns about what could replace the GAB, because lawmakers, Republican lawmakers, some of whom have been on this show, have made it very clear they would like to replace it with something different. What are your concerns about that?
Well, I think we have an excellent model. Scholars who look at this hold us up as an example. You go back to what you see in other states. Elections and campaign finance and lobbying are often under a partisan Secretary of State who's either elected or appointed by the legislature or the governor. And we've seen public confidence in elections in California, Ohio, and Florida, and other states tainted by their political ambitions, and I think that's what we want to stay away from in Wisconsin.
Kevin Kennedy is the head of the Government Accountability Board. We appreciate your time today. Thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Next are the governor and Republican lawmakers planning even more tax cuts. And how will they balance that against a projected deficit? I'll be asking one of the GOP's young guns when Up Front continues.
Up Front with Mike Goucher, brought to you by the American Transmission Company and the Wisconsin Corn Growers Association.